I'm very excited to have my friend Bill Cork up here on the stage. I've had the privilege of working with Bill for years now, and certainly his time at MDA, it's really gone to the next level. And what we wanted to do with this conversation is really take some of the things that you heard from the governor and really bring it home to what Bill sees day to day in our economic development shop at the state level. So. And I'm not going to start with any softballs here because I really do think that some of the things that we have seen in growth and development in Mississippi certainly come with trade-offs. And you see it in the news and you hear it in conversations with your local industries, certainly if you are in the economic development space. And that's with the data centers. So obviously tremendous capital investment and all the things that come along with it that benefit local communities, but there's also some trade-offs, and so they obviously use a ton of energy. They have some community impacts, whether that's in the building phase of those data centers and cloud storage centers. With that being said, I really wanted to ask Bill kind of how he views those trade-offs and what we're doing as a state to mitigate any downsides to these projects and to kind of create a holistic picture of what we're looking at.
Yeah, well, first of all, John. Hello.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Oh, he's bringing you one right here. Uh-oh. Yeah.
Hide this now. John, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
First of all, and we can get into as much of this as you want to, but I want to say a couple things. First of all, thanks to all of you in this room and so many others in the business community. By the way, it's like $65 billion in capital investment.
Incredible. Unbelievable.
$5 billion, but you know how hard it is to sell $5 billion projects in this state? Very hard. It's about $65 billion, over 25,000 jobs, over 200 projects closed since Governor Reeves took office. We've made 6 data center announcements. All right, so there's 193 or other projects that we did that don't get the same attention as these big projects and that have developed most of the jobs. The data centers aren't producing but a couple of thousand direct jobs that we count in that score. So when you take about 22,000 jobs, over almost 200 projects, and the diversity of industries across the state, including many expansions that you guys have done, that's to me is the real story. The real story is that they're geographically dispersed all over the state. I think it's something over like 40 counties have received notable wins through this area. Small and large population centers in some of our rural areas. So before we get into the talk of the big projects, which everybody wants to talk about, and I know we've got legislators in the back, including the speaker, keep funding our site development grant programs, keep working on workforce development programs. It makes a difference. We couldn't do it without that whole team effort and all the communities that have stepped up to play in this game. That's the first thing I'd like to say, John.
Yeah.
On the data centers are big, they're noteworthy, transformational for the state. But data center is not a data center is not a data center, okay? Each one of these has its own DNA. Each one of these does something slightly different. And each one of them, outside of the economic benefits that are obvious, have a different purpose. Some of these data centers will store your cat pictures. Some of them will be making tokens in the most advanced AI clusters in the world. And those have a different purpose and a different reason, and we treat them a little bit differently. So for example, AWS committed to make a major center of excellence for AI and machine learning. XAI is doing the same thing. Some of the other data centers have not made a similar pledge. So a company like AWS got a special session and some special treatment. The other data centers are just getting our standard data center incentives. Let's do the math for a second. The XAI announcement was a $20 billion announcement. Let's assume 35% of that is contracted work at a 3.5%
contractor's tax. That's $245 million to the state of Mississippi for the construction of that facility. Now, I don't know what the exact number is going to be, but I do know that's real money. So when I hear some communities saying, how come I didn't get a data center and how come I didn't get the benefit? Guess what? You're getting the benefit in every community in Mississippi because Lieutenant Governor got up here and promised how he's going to spend all those billions. Part of that future billions is going to be made up in what these data centers are going to be paying in taxes. And Compass, Avio, all will be paying a similar type of tax. We did do a rebate for AWS, but AWS broke the seal. Okay, they made it, they put us on the map. And so we just say that from a tax perspective, the state is going to do very, very, very well in terms of its direct taxes, even with the exemptions that we offer. To talk about power. Power is a completely unique animal for these data centers as well. What I can tell you is this, the biggest complaint we get is, my rates are going to go up because of these data centers. I know I've got some energy sector folks in the room and lobbyists that are members here. Let me just tell you this, how would you know if your rate's going to go up because of a data center? The answer is, any power company that wants to raise your rate is going to have to make a rate case in front of the Public Service Commission. Have those cases been made? No. Are there any plans to make them? Not that I'm aware of. So the data centers themselves are not going to cause your rates to go up unless somebody asks Mother May I first. And there's 3 elected officials on the Public Service Commission that will probably have something to say about that. The second thing is as most of you know, and as Entergy and others have really gone to the mat to proclaim, is these companies are buying their own generation and bringing it with them, essentially, either on their own, in the case of XAI. They co-located their data centers next to an old Duke power plant site, and Elon Musk just bought 5 380 megawatt generators to install there to supply 1.9 gigawatts for his cluster in the Memphis, North Mississippi market. AWS has reportedly cut a deal with Entergy to pay for the new generation. You've already had 2 announcements, one in Vicksburg and one in Greenville, which those announcements are being made in large part because they're going to be servicing the load from AWS. So those are just a few of the examples. On terms of water, going to suck the ground dry, we're all going to be eating mud, there's not going to be any water left, okay? No. All these data centers either going to air cool their systems or they are going to use water reclamation. In the plan, for example, with XAI is to take sewer water from Memphis and use it to cool its, treated sewer water to cool it. We spent $215 million in a special session to issue bonds for this for Madison County to build the Beatty's Bluff water reclamation facility, which will take sewer water from that area, pump it out there, treat it, and then recycle it back to AWS for use for cooling. So I just want to kind of dispel some of the myths here around these data centers. The state's not giving the taxes away, okay? There are lots of taxes going to be coming in. They're not going to be sucking the water dry, and they're bringing their own power. And I can tell you that if a company comes here and wants to violate any of those principles, Governor Reeves isn't going to be supporting them, okay? The data center incentives have to be certified by MDA, and if somebody doesn't have a plan for these things, we're going to make it very difficult for them to get certified. So that's the story on data centers.
Well, and I appreciate
we should welcome them.
Well, no, I think it's so important that that all the information be told. And obviously, there's nothing in this world that's 100% one way or the other. So we do need to have that full picture. But it just seems like to me in the press, a lot of times you just get one direction of that story. So no, I really appreciate that. You also mentioned something earlier that really stood out to me because it was something that I mentioned to our board earlier today, and that's that site development piece. And I've heard you say it 100 times. I think I've heard the governor say it just as many. But the need for companies with speed to market when they are looking at their future plans. And
well, you all know this. I mean, in your own businesses, you're mobilizing capital every day. You know that you've got to get it spent so you can make that return. The governor's fond of saying, we want to go from spending money to making money the fastest. Speed is the new incentive in this very explosive age of capital deployment, and it's getting even faster with what the president is doing to repatriate a lot of this capital. The governor and I took a meeting the other day for a $50 billion project looking at Mississippi that's going to be funded through some of this tariff money and commitments from foreign investors. So they want to go fast. There's a deadline on it, and so speed is essential. Almost every one of the major projects we've announced, including every data center project, those sites took advantage of the site development grant program before those projects announced. Every single one without exception. And we're using that money to also advance new product, like a 2,000-acre port site in the south of Vicksburg, like a major 2,000-acre development in the Hattiesburg market, like the 5th mega site in Golden Triangle, and in Holly Springs and in Marshall County. So all over the state, we are trying to take this money and deploy it to good use so that we can exploit the speed to market requirement that companies have today. And by the way, all of our competitors are wise to it. Louisiana just announced a new program. Arkansas announced their first one last year. And so, this is a very competitive market, and we cannot take our foot off the gas because their neighbors are making announcements. Georgia finally got on board. They realized they had to compete, and they had a little piddly $10 million program with 6 sites, which we dwarfed. We've spent almost $200 million in state money with local match to advance this site development, and it is absolutely the reason why we're winning so many projects.
Yeah, and that local match is so key, and that was one of the messages I got to my board was you need to encourage your locals to put that money in, because leveraging the state funds, it multiplies across the board to your benefit. So obviously I have been, in my previous role, and I certainly expect to do the same in my current role, been a big supporter of that program, and that falls under the bucket of legislative agenda. So I know that your legislative agenda does not start and stop with site development money. I've obviously read, starting with the governor's EBR and then some of the stories out in the press. I know you have a pretty ambitious legislative agenda, whether it's in the energy space, the sites development space. I was just wondering if you could maybe tick off your top 2 or 3 of the big chunks that you're looking to move the needle on this session, and how we as the business community can, number 1, possibly assist, and number 2, how do we benefit? How do we play a role in that?
Glad to do that. But one further headline, we used to have a program, still do, called the ACE grant program, which was sort of an ace in the hole for closing economic development projects. It was a cash grant program. The MFLEX program, which you helped champion, John, and so many of you in this room, is so successful that this will be the first year in our legislative history where we're not asking for more ACE grant money because the tax credits, which are performance-based, are working so well. So, and by the way, a model for the nation. So we're not asking for any ACE money, Mr. Speaker, if you're in the room, but we are asking for this. We are asking for about $120 million to help advance our energy agenda, coming in 2 buckets. One is a site development grant-specific program for $20 million to help accelerate off-site energy infrastructure development. The challenge the power companies have is that they can't build a lot of prospective infrastructure because of or acquire right-of-way or do that without a specific end user in mind or without making a rate case. This would allow us to help work in some areas where we've got a distribution line running adjacent to our industrial parks, but we don't have it connected yet. So how can we begin to accelerate the interconnection to power, which is so critical? The governor's talked about this. The other is a $100 million program because for the same reason, the power companies have a difficult time buying things in advance without a customer in mind, including things like transformers, substation equipment, switchgear, that sort of thing. So we're asking for $100 million to go out and pre-buy or at least put deposits on order for some of the common industrial related electrical equipment so that we can shorten the timeline between the time a company wants to come here and when we can deliver it. In some cases around the state now, because of transmission upgrade requirements or distribution upgrades, going through the process could take 1 to 4 years to get just the electrical service that we need to support these projects. We've got to shrink that timeline, and we think partnering with the energy companies to provide a stopgap measure, which doesn't need to be a permanent grant or subsidy, it could just be a temporary holding place so that when we do get the customer, then we can convert that infrastructure back to the rate base, recover that money from the power companies, and then reinvest it at the next site. So it's kind of like a revolving type of program. We think this is critical for the speed to market play because power is the new incentive.
That definitely sounds like a lot of ways that we can plug in because, again, a lot of those activities don't just accrue to one sector, one area. It's really something that can benefit the entire state. So obviously I would love to sit up here and talk about all this stuff because I find it fascinating. The economic development, my predecessor at MMA was a former economic developer and sort of preached the gospel to me. So this is really the kind of stuff that I like to dig deep on. But unfortunately, we do have a schedule to keep to, but one thing that, and this is a similar question that I asked the governor, and I would love to get your perspective on it. You know, as we look to the future, obviously we kind of have a trajectory that we've been on the last 2-3 years. We've been super successful. We obviously want that to continue as much as possible. But as we look down the road, and you know, when I say down the road, it can be in the next 1 to 2 years, so immediate conversations that you're having. You kind of mentioned some of those. I know you can't divulge a lot of information on that, but even beyond that, so you're 5 and 10 years down the road, you know, what are you seeing? What kind of interest are you getting from those site development folks? And then how can we best help position ourselves and the state of Mississippi?
I think you ought to watch the headlines very carefully about what's going on the international scene. Reshoring critical minerals. I'm seeing a lot of critical minerals projects. Things like nuclear energy and related industries. We're relying a lot on China and Russia for a lot of those matters. In fact, Korea Zinc just announced a project in Tennessee, which was a multi-billion-dollar project to work on rare earths processing. We were semifinalists for that project. They were looking at Vicksburg for that. We are seeing those kind of projects endlessly now. We have a great relationship. The governor and I went out and met with the Secretary of Commerce and his team to sit down and provide a strategy and a waypoint. We handed them a prospectus of our top 40 sites in the state so that as they're going around the world trying to sell sites, they can put that under their arm and carry it with them. We're talking weekly with the Department of War and Department of Treasury and Department of Commerce on opportunities. So anything you see in the national headlines is likely in my pipeline right now. But I want to tell you something that I have learned in this, as I've been exposed to some of the brightest minds in artificial intelligence over the last few years. And that is we are fixing to go through a major transformation, both in how you do business, how we deliver education. I know you're all playing with ChatGPT and stuff like that. I promise you most of the people in this room have not scratched the surface. And when you've seen what I've seen at some of these conferences, like NVIDIA's conference I went to last year in San Jose, we've been invited to go back. The governor's been invited to speak. You walk through these rooms, healthcare is going to be transformed. Everything we know about the way we live is going to be transformed. And it's going to happen very, very quickly. I think we are in a great place in Mississippi because of our small size, because of the way we know everybody, because we all have a really good handle on our problems and our solutions. If we can embrace this new technology and use it to our advantage, it'll equalize the income disparities. It will equalize the geographic differences. Being in the Delta anymore isn't going to be a disadvantage because you can now adapt the technology to both your learning, educational attainment, and global reach in ways we've never contemplated. And I hope over the next 2 years, we can all work together to develop a new and aspirational vision to capture this new and emerging technology as the cornerstone for our future. And I think that we've already started by anchoring some of the major players in the industry right here in Mississippi. And so I'm just very optimistic about the future, but it's not going to come without some radical transformation in the way we all live and work.
Well, I appreciate that. I would love to end that conversation on an optimistic note, but there's a challenge to everybody in the room to understand what's coming and to get ready for it, and that's on the workforce side, economic development side. So let's everybody give Bill a big round of applause. I really appreciate his time.